Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. Our today's session is on phase 6 of the novel Tess of the D'Urberville. In today's session we would cover phase 6 that is titled as The Convert. Before I continue with today's session, I would just quickly like to share a review of the previous session. We started phase 5, The Woman Pays, in the previous session. We covered chapters 35 to 44 and finished phase 5. In doing so, we covered the following aspects. We explored the text of these chapters. We explored related themes. We discussed the development of various characters. Especially, we looked at the development of the characters of Tess, who is the female protagonist, and of Angel in relation to Tess, who is the male lead. We critically analyzed the selected parts of text to see how the themes were embedded, how they threw light on the development of different characters, etc. As far as today's session is concerned, we will start phase 6, that is titled as The Convert. We will cover chapters 45 to 52 and thus we would finish this phase. In today's session, we would follow the same scheme of presentation of parts of text, of going through different chapters, their important events and happenings, and following the same scheme, we would look at the development of characters. So here is the first chapter of this phase, that is overall chapter 45, and here we have the opening text of this chapter. Till this moment she had never seen or heard from D'Urberville since her departure from Trantridge. The re-encounter came at a heavy moment, one of all moments calculated to permit its impact with the least emotional shock. But such was unreasoning memory that though he stood there openly and palpably a converted man who was sorrowing for his past irregularities, a fear overcame her, paralyzing her movement so that she neither retreated nor advanced. Now if you remember, the previous chapter ended the previous phase, and the last chapter ended up a point where we saw that as Tess, who had gone to see the parents of Angel and who, disappointed by the conversation of the brothers of Angel that she overheard, who decided to come back without meeting the family of Claire's. And when she was on her way back, she stopped at a place where she heard somebody preaching. Now, who was the person who was preaching? To her shock, she came to know that it was Alec. Alec, who was a reason of all her sufferings that she has been through so far. Now she, in this chapter, what we notice is that she is so very much struck by this bitter reality of his presence, and somehow the fear of what has happened to her previously is not gone yet, so she is just paralyzed and she cannot move ahead, she cannot go back, she is just stuck into all that. To think of what emanated from that countenance when she saw it last, and to behold it now. There was the same handsome unpleasantness of mine, but now he wore neatly trimmed old-fashioned whiskers, the sable moustache having disappeared, and his dress was half clerical, a modification which had changed his expression sufficiently to abstract the dandyism from his features and to hinder for a second her belief in his identity. So his physical appearance had changed a lot. There was a lot of change. The dandyism from his features, as Hardy says, was removed now, and with a half clerical dress that he was wearing, he was a completely different person, completely different to the extent that Tess for a while couldn't even recognize him. When we look at what happens in this chapter, here are a few things. Tess has not seen Alex since she left him for the first time, leaving his family's service. When she sees and hears him testifying to his religious conversion here, she is, of course, shocked, as I have said earlier. There is a change in his appearance. Now he has a very neatly trimmed mustache and a half-clerical dress. Alec has not been reformed, but rather transfigured, his passion for religion and religious devotion instead of sensuality. Though she can think of many examples in Christianity where worst sinners became best saints, she finds this change in him unnatural. Now, this feeling that she has of all this being unnatural, it foreshadows a lot that might happen in future. She wants to leave without being noticed by Alec, but Alec sees her and runs after her. He tells her that he has found God through the guidance of the Reverend Claire. Again, ironically, who is the person who has brought Alec to this path of God? It is Angel's father, Reverend Claire. Tess, however, is very much angry and she doesn't want to listen to anything. She clearly tells him that she disbelieves him. She also criticizes people like Alec who ruin their people's lives and enjoy everything in the world irrespective of the idea of right and wrong. And then they try to secure a place in heaven by suddenly converting. So she criticizes him and they have a long discussion with reference to belief. During this discussion, we notice her idealizing and following her husband's views. Alec criticizes her for blindly following what Angel believes in, but she continues to take his side. Alec expresses fear of Tess being a source of temptation for him again. As they come to a stone monument called the Cross in Hand, he asks Tess to swear in the name of this cross that she will never tempt him again. She agrees and Alec leaves. He receives a letter from Reverend Claire to calm himself, and later on Tess comes to know that the cross in hand signifies ill omen. Well, there are a couple of points with relation to this that are important. The first important thing that I would like to discuss with reference to this chapter is the change in Alec. The change that we notice in Alec is great, yet a superficial change. The change in his personality is significant, yes. However, Hardy almost immediately establishes that his great conversation is superficial. He remains the same hedonist as before, but he merely has shifted his passion from sexuality to spirituality. This suggests that Alec may easily shift back to his former ways. He even himself says that he risks returning to his former lust when he looks at women's faces. And he actually asks Tess not to persuade him to again be interested in her through her looks, not to attract him. This becomes very, very ironic. Ironically, he believes that it is Tess who is responsible for his sins and not he himself. That is why he even asks her not to be a source of temptation for him again. Well, Hardy has criticized religion and religious practices through this chapter as well. He looks at religion with a very, very critical eye. Tess's reference to the tradition of Christianity holding up its greatest sinners as its greatest saints is actually a sharp criticism in the context of Alec. He who in the eyes of Tess is a great sinner and has remained a great sinner so far, now suddenly he appears as a great saint, as a great preacher. Again, swearing in the name of cross in hand is ironic. They take it as Christian cross, whereas it is a symbol of destruction and evil, and it has nothing to do with the Christian cross. It thus becomes a symbol of the unauthentic nature of Alec's conversion. He has no deep knowledge of religion. All that he talks about and all that he preaches is superficial. Well, dear students, here is some more text from chapter 45, and this gives us the background, how he was completely a converted, a changed person. He told he came to Trantridge 2 or 3 years ago to preach on behalf of some missionary society, and I, wretched fellow that I was, insulted him when in his disinterestedness he tried to reason with me and show me the way. Here Alec is talking about Angel Clare's father, the clergyman Clare, Reverend Clare, who came once to Trantridge. Remember the the farmhouse, the place of Alec. And at that time, Alec was not ready to listen to him. Alec told he did not resent my conduct. He simply said that someday I should receive the first fruits of the Spirit, that those who came to scoff sometimes remained to pray. There was a strange magic in his words. They sank into my mind, but the loss of my mother hit me most, and by degrees I was brought to see daylight. Since then, my one desire has been to hand on the true view to others, and that is what I was trying to do today. Though it is only lately that I have preached hereabout, the first months of my ministry have been spent in the north of England among strangers, where I preferred to make my earliest clumsy attempts so as to acquire courage before undergoing that severest of all tests of one's sincerity, addressing those who have known one and have been one's companions in the days of darkness. If you could only notice the pleasure of having a good slap at yourself, I'm sure. So Alec tells his story. The text continues. "Don't go on with it," she cried passionately as she turned away from him to a stile by the wayside on which she bent herself. "I can't believe in such sudden things. I feel indignant with you for talking to me like this. When you know what harm you have done me. You and those like you take your fill of pleasure on earth by making the life of such as me bitter and black with sorrow, and then it is a fine thing when you have had enough of that to think of securing your pleasure in heaven by becoming converted. Out upon such, I don't believe in you, I hate it." So here actually Tess becomes a mouthpiece of Hardy, and this is a sharp criticism on the people like Alec, who would take their full share of pleasure in the worldly deeds, and then there would come a point where they would become converted and they would claim for all the heavenly pleasures as well. Tess clearly and explicitly she expresses her hatred for Alec. "Tess," he insisted, "don't speak so. It came to me like a jolly new idea, and you don't believe me. Why don't you believe me? What don't you believe? Your conversion, your scheme of religion. Why?" She dropped her voice. "Because a better man than you does not believe in such." Now, ironically, this better man is a reference to Angel. What a woman's reason. Who is this better man? I can't tell you. Well, he declared, a resentment beneath his words seeming ready to spring out at a moment's notice. "God forbid that I should say I am a good man, and you know I don't say any such thing. I am new to goodness, truly, but newcomers see furthest sometimes." "Yes," she replied sadly, "but I cannot believe in your conversion to a new spirit. Such flashes as you feel, Alec, I fear don't last." Now, this prophetic wording of Tess, where she says, "Such flashes as you feel, Alec, I fear don't last," they actually foreshadow that maybe in near future we would see Alec reverting back to what he actually was before. With this we come to chapter 46. And in this chapter what we notice is that the omen proves correct a few days later when Alec approaches Tess in the fields and asks her to marry him. I'm talking about the omen of, you see the cross that they had seen there. That was a kind of ill omen. So he meets her again. He suggests that they can go to Africa to be missionaries. Tess is angry on all this and she tells him that she is already married. She asks Alec to leave. She begins another letter to Angel but is unable to finish it. Once again Alec approaches Tess. This time he asks her to pray for him. Tess refuses by saying that she cannot do this for Alec. She recites Angel's reasons for doubting the validity of church doctrine, and what we notice is, number one, Tess's love for her husband, Angel. Number two, she, because of this love, blindly follows what Angel believes in. Alec criticizes Tess that she has no religion, whereas Tess responds by saying that she has a religion but no belief in the supernatural. Alec also blames her that he has missed an opportunity to preach in order to see her. It is important to notice that Alec keeps on blaming Tess for everything. He has already in the previous chapter blamed her that she was a cause of or source of attraction for him that made him fall a victim to sin. And now again we notice that he is criticizing her, and he is blaming her that it is because of her that he could not go for preaching and he missed an opportunity for that. Before leaving, Alec gives Tess a poster giving the time when he would preach, but claims that he would rather be with Tess. Well, here is some selected part of the text that I am going to read for you that would provide you insights into how she thinks and how she feels. She thought that she would not open the door, but as there was no sense in that either, she arose and, having lifted the latch, stepped back quickly. Now this is a part from the text that shows yet another visit of Alec. He has come to her place where she is living, and she has no other option but to let him come in and to meet him. He came in, saw her, and flung himself down into a chair before speaking. Tess, I couldn't help it, he began desperately, as he wiped his heated face, which had also a superimposed flush of excitement. I felt that I must call at least to ask, how are you? I assure you I had not been thinking of you at all till I saw you that Sunday. Now I cannot get rid of your image, try how I may. It is hard that a good woman should do harm to a bad man, yet so it is. If you would only pray for me, Tess. The suppressed discontent of his manner was almost pitiable, and yet Tess did not pity him. How can I pray for you, she said, when I am forbidden to believe that the great power who moves the world would alter his plans on my account? You really think that? Yes, I have been cured of the presumption of thinking otherwise. Cured by whom? Of course, he is curious to know. By my husband, if I must tell. So what we notice is that she believes in what Angel used to believe. She has started following her husband in that. Ah, your husband, how strange it seems. I remember you hinted something of the sort the other day. What do you really believe in these matters, Tess? He asked. You seem to have no religion, perhaps owing to me. But I have, though I do not believe in anything supernatural. D'Urberville looked at her with misgiving. Then do you think that the line I take is all wrong? A good deal of it. This is her response. And yet I have felt so sure about it, said uneasily. I believe in the spirit of the Sermon on the Mount, and so did my dear husband, but I don't believe. Here she gave her negations. The fact is, said D'Urberville dryly, whatever your dear husband believed you accept, and whatever he rejected you reject, without the least inquiry or reasoning on your own part. That's just like you women. Your mind is enslaved to his. So he bitterly, harshly criticizes her. Ah, because he knew everything, said she, with a triumphant simplicity of faith in Angel Clare that the most perfect man could hardly have deserved, much less her husband. So what we say कि मोहब्बत अंधी होती है, this is exactly the same case. It is her blind love for Angel that makes her believe in Angel and his beliefs so strongly. Well, here are some important discussion points with reference to this chapter. The first important point is that Hardy makes very clear in this chapter that Alec D'Urberville has changed little since Tess left Trantridge Cross, as he continues to behave as before. He repeats many of the same actions that prefaced his seduction of Tess, following her and using his monetary influence as charity to endear himself to Tess in order to win her. So again, the offers to help financially, again following her, these are the things that he already used for the first time when he seduced her. Alec continues to evade responsibility for his actions. When he discusses what happened to Tess, he does not blame himself for seducing her, but blames mothers who do not warn their daughters that men can seduce. He also reiterates his claim that Tess has caused his sinfulness by tempting him, rather than accepting the blame for his own weakness of morals. It is very, very ironic that he puts all the blame on the shoulders of Tess. Alec d'Urberville, rather than posing a threat to Tess's devotion to Angel, instead bolsters her love for her husband. He reinforces Angel's purity of belief through contrast, while reminding Tess of their similarities of morals. Yet there remains an unfortunate similarity between Angel and Alec that Tess realizes during this chapter when she mentions that Farmer Groby cannot hurt Tess, for he does not love her. The one commonality that Angel and Alec have, despite their contrary natures, is that both inflict pain on Tess through love, whether it is expressed as an ideal in the case of Angel or a physical act as in the case of Alec. This leads us to chapter 47, and in this chapter what we see is that in early spring, Tess has a difficult job to do. She's been assigned a stint of difficult work as a thresher on the farm. A man comes to see Tess and her three companions watch. They do not recognize the man as Alec. However, for Alec does not appear as a cruel, angry person as they have heard Tess describing him. Rather, he is quite cool to them. Again, what I would say is that his appearance is quite deceptive for these women. Alec appears once again. This time he asserts that he is no longer a preacher. So the apprehensions that Tess had at the outset of this phase, they prove to be quite right, and now we notice that he once again announces that he is not a preacher anymore. He urges Tess to go with him and claims that his love for her has strengthened. He also expresses her concern that he is upset that her husband neglects her. In response, Tess slaps his face with a leather glove. Alec is, of course, infuriated on all this. He tells Tess that he is her true husband. He says he will be back in the afternoon to collect her as he was her master and would be her master. By making this assertion, he is threatening Tess, and after saying this, once again he leaves. Well, here is some important part of the text. The newcomer was indeed Alec d'Urberville, the late evangelist, despite his changed attire and aspect. It was obvious at a glance that the original wealth-lust had come back, that he had restored himself as nearly as a man could do who had grown 3 or 4 years older, or to the old jaunties, slapdash guise under which Tess had first known her admirer and cousin so-called. Having decided to remain where she was, Tess sat down among the bundles out of sight of the ground and began her meal. Till by and by she heard footsteps on the ladder, and immediately after Alec appeared upon the stack, now an oblong and level platform of sheaves. He strode across them and sat down opposite of her without a word. Tess continued to eat her modest dinner, a slice of thick pancake which she had brought with her. The other workfolk were by this time all gathered around under the rick, where the loose straw formed a comfortable retreat. "I'm here again, as you see," said d'Urberville. "Why do you trouble me so?" she cried, reproach flashing from her very finger ends. So she is very much angry. The text continues. "I trouble you? I think I may ask, why do you trouble me? Sure, I do not trouble you any when. You say you don't, but you do. You haunt me. Those very eyes that you turned upon me with such a bitter flash a moment ago, they come to me just as you showed them then, in the night and in the day. Tess, ever since you told me of that child of ours, it is just as if my feelings, which have been flowing in a strong puritanical stream, had suddenly found a way open in the direction of you, and had all at once gushed through. The religious channel is left dry forthwith, and it is you who have done it. So again he blames Tess that it is because of her, and it is because of she telling him about their child, and it is because of the attraction that she creates that he again has lost his interest in religion. What is the response of Tess? She gazed in silence. What? You have given up your preaching entirely? She asked. She had gathered from Angel sufficient of the incredulity of modern thought to despise flash enthusiasm, but as a woman she was somewhat appalled. In affected severity, D'Urberville continued, entirely. I have broken every engagement since that afternoon I was to address the drunkards at Casterbridge Fair. So once again he is back there, once again he asks for, once again he claims for Tess and her companionship, and he has completely forgotten his recent past interest in religion. Well, dear students, here is some more text that would further give you insights into how their conversation keeps on going on and how they respond to each other. Well, never mind, he resumed. Here I am, my love, as in the old times. Not as then, never as then. It's different, she entreated. And there was never warmth with me. Oh, why didn't you keep your faith, if the loss of it has brought you to speak to me like this? Because you've knocked it out of me, so the evil be upon your sweet head. Your husband little thought how his teaching would recoil upon him. Ha ha. I'm awfully glad you have made an apostate of me all the same. Tess, I am more taken with you than ever, and I pity you too. For all your closeness, I see you are, in a bad way, neglected by one who ought to cherish you. So he makes claims that he is more than ever before interested in her, and he also expresses his regret over how he thinks she is being neglected by Angel, the husband of Tess. She could not get her morsels of food down her throat. Her lips were dry and she was ready to choke. The voices and laughs of the work folk eating and drinking under the rick came to her as if they were a quarter of a mile off. It is cruelty to me, she said. How can you treat me to this talk, if you care ever so little for me? True, true, he said, wincing a little. I didn't come to reproach you for my deeds. I came, Tess, to say that I don't like you to be working like this, and I have come on purpose for you. You say you have a husband who is not I. Well, perhaps you have, but I have never seen him, and you have not told me his name, and altogether he seems rather a mythological personage. However, even if you have one, I think I am nearer to you than he is. So he is reclaiming her. I, at any rate, try to help you out of trouble, but he does not. Bless his invisible face. The words of the stern prophet Hosea that I used to read come back to me. Don't you know them, Tess? And she shall follow after her lover, but she shall not overtake him, and she shall seek him, but shall not find him. Then shall she say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then she was it better with me than now. So he is again quoting some words to support his claim. Tess, my trap is waiting just under the hill. So he offers her to come with him. The text continues, and darling mine, not his, you know the rest. Her face had been rising to a dull crimson fire while he spoke, but she did not answer. You have been the cause of my backsliding, he continued, stretching his arm towards her waist. You should be willing to share it and leave that mule you call husband forever. One of her leather gloves, which she had taken off to eat her skimmer cake, lay in her lap, and without the slightest warning she passionately swung the glove by the gauntlet directly in his face. It was heavy and thick as a warrior's, and it struck him flat on the mouth. Fancy might have regarded the act as the recrudescence of a trick in which her armed progenitors were not unpracticed. So it seemed as if she was very well ready for that. Alec fiercely started up from his reclining position. A scarlet oozing appeared where her blow had alighted, and in a moment the blood began dropping from his mouth upon the straw. But he soon controlled himself, calmly drew his handkerchief from his pocket and mopped his bleeding lips. She too had sprung up, but she sank down again. "Now punish me," she said, turning up her eyes to him with the hopeless defiance of the sparrow's gaze before its captor twists its neck. Now this sparrow's gaze that is used as an imagery here, and the analogy of Tess being captured by this man, as Hardy draws the analogy of, you see, making a comparison with a sparrow that is going to get its neck twisted by its captor. This also reminds us of a previous scene where you see, as she was moving through the forest, she killed some of the birds out of mercy. "Whip me, crush me, you need not mind those people under the rick. I shall not cry out. Once victim, always victim. That's the law." Very, very miserably and very, very, you see, bitterly she says this. "Oh no, no, Tess," he said blandly. "I can make full allowance for this. Yet you most unjustly forget one thing, that I would have married you if you had not put it out of my power to do so. Did I not ask you flatly to be my wife, hey? Answer me," he said. "You did. And you cannot be, but remember one thing." His voice hardened as his temper got the better of him with the recollection of his sincerity in asking her and her present ingratitude, and he stepped across to her side and held her by the shoulders so that she shook under his grasp. "Remember, my lady, I was your master once. I will be your master again. If you are any man's wife, you are mine." The threshers now began to stir below. So, in the backdrop of this movement of the threshers, what we notice is the threat that he gives to her, that she belongs to him, she belonged to him, and she would always belong to him. Nobody else's wife she can be but his. "So much for our quarrel," he said, letting her go. "Now I shall leave you and shall come again for your answer during the afternoon. You don't know me yet, but I know you." She had not spoken again, remaining as if stunned. D'Urberville retreated over the sheaves and descended the ladder, where the workers below rose and stretched their arms and shook down the beer they had drunk. Then the threshing machine started afresh, and amid the renewed rustle of the straw, Tess resumed her position by the buzzing drum as one in a dream, untying sheaf after sheaf in endless succession. So she joins the work once again, but mentally she is absent. She just seems to be in the state of a dream. I would rather call it a nightmare. Here are some important discussion points with reference to this chapter. What is already foreshadowed about Alec, it comes true here, and we find that he is back to the same what he was previously. The full rejection of religion by Alec d'Urberville that Hardy has foreshadowed earlier becomes manifest here. It reveals the superficiality of his religious conversion. It also throws light on Hardy's views and how he criticizes the religious practices and the clergymen. We also need to notice a contrast between Alec and Tess. In contrast to Alec, who exhibits a weakness and adaptability in his beliefs, Tess demonstrates more strength and fortitude. What she believes in, she believes in. What she doesn't believe in, she doesn't believe in, and she sticks to that. We see her emerging as a far stronger woman before, especially when it comes to facing Alec and even slapping Alec with the glove that she has. This leads us to chapter 48, and at the outset of chapter 48 what we see is Alec comes back that afternoon as he had promised. He walks Tess home and asks her to trust him to take care of both Tess and her family. Again, what we notice is he is using the same tactic of providing for her and for her family. It is the same tactic that he used earlier when he seduced her for the first time by offering money and comfort. He continues to visit Flintcomb Ash to observe Tess. Tess again refuses his offers. That night again she writes a letter to Angel confessing her loyalty and her love. She asserts in her letter that she lives completely for him and would be content to live with him as his servant if he does not want her to live as his wife. She requests for his help against the temptation presented by Alec. Before we move forward, I would just like to point out that we need to understand the miserable condition of Tess. She is passing through the toughest time of her life. These are the weakest times of her living. These are the times when she needs support badly. And in this context, when support and the offer for support comes from Alec, it really becomes hard for Tess to refuse, to deny that. And we need to notice the internal conflict that is going on in Tess and her hard efforts to deny and to refuse all the offers that are made by Alec. The only person that she thinks can be of some help to her and who can save her from all the cruelty of Alec and all the tempting evil offers of Alec, she believes it is her husband who can save her. And under that pressure, again she writes a letter to Angel. Here is the text of the letter that she has written to Angel. My own husband, let me call you so. I must, even if it makes you angry to think of such an unworthy wife as I. I must cry to you in my trouble. I have no one else. I am so exposed to temptation, Angel. I fear to say who it is, and I do not like to write about it at all. But I cling to you in a way you cannot think. Can you not come to me now, at once, before anything terrible happens? So what we notice is she fears herself. She fears that out of the pressure of the circumstances she would give in. And there is nobody who can rescue her. There is nobody who can save her. It is only her husband whom she calls, she addresses as my own husband. And what she says is that she clings to him in a way that he cannot think. And he, as is a way, she may not fall a victim to the temptation offered by Alec. So she asks him to come at once before anything terrible happens. Oh, I know you cannot because you are so far away. I think I must die if you do not come soon or tell me to come to you. The punishment you have meted out to me is deserved. I do know that, well deserved. And you are right and just to be angry with me. So again she takes all the blame on her own shoulders and she does not blame him. But Angel, please, please, not to be just, only a little kind to me, even if I do not deserve it, and come to me. If you would come, I could die in your arms. I would be well content to do that if so be you had forgiven me, Angel. I live entirely for you. I love you too much to blame you for going away, and I know it was necessary you should find a farm. Do not think I shall say a word of sting or bitterness. Again, theme of self-sacrifice, theme of self-blame, theme of taking responsibility is there. She's taking responsibility for everything. Anyhow, the letter continues. Only come back to me. I am desolate without you, my darling, oh, so desolate. I do not mind having to work, but if you will send me one little line and say, I'm coming soon, I will bide on, Angel, oh, so cheerfully. It has been so much my religion ever since we were married to be faithful to you in every thought and look, that even when a man speaks a compliment to me before I am aware, it seems wronging you. Theme of guilt comes in. She feels guilty even I would say unnecessarily she feels guilty when she's not herself to be blamed for. When somebody else, a man, looks at her, she thinks she is wronging her husband. Have you never felt one little bit of what you used to feel when you were at the dairy? If you have, how can you keep away from me? I am the same woman, Angel, as you fell in love with. Yes, the very same. Not the one you disliked but never saw. What was the past to me as soon as I met you? It was a dead thing altogether. She reaffirms, she reasserts the same claims that past is gone for her and she is not interested in her past, and what she is interested is only Angel. She claims, I became another woman, filled full of new life from you. How could I be the early one? Why do you not see this, dear? If you would only be a little more conceited and believe in yourself so far as to see that you were strong enough to work this change in me, you would perhaps be in a mind to come to me, your poor wife. How silly I was in my happiness when I thought I could trust you always to love me. I ought to have known that such as that was not for poor me. But I am sick at heart, not only for old times, but for the present. Think, how it do hurt any heart not to see you ever. Ah, if I could only make your dear heart ache one little minute of each day as mine does every day, and all day long, it might lead you to show pity to your poor lonely one. So the whole letter, I would say, is voicing her agony. The letter continues on this slide as well. People still say that I am rather pretty, Angel. Handsome is the word they use, since I wish to be truthful. Perhaps I am what they say, but I do not value my good looks. I only like to have them because they belong to you, my dear, and that there may be at least one thing about me worth your having. So much have I felt this that when I met with an annoyance on account of the same, I tied up my face in a bandage as long as people would believe in it. Oh, Angel, I tell you, all this is not from vanity. You will certainly know I do not, but only that you may come to me. So she is telling all this not just to impress him of her, good nature or of her purity. Rather, it is just a plea to ask him to come back. If you really cannot come to me, will you let me come to you? I am, as I say, worried, pressed to do what I will not do. It cannot be that I shall yield 1 inch, yet I am in terror as to what an accident might lead to, and I so defenseless on account of my first error. I cannot say more about this. It makes me too miserable, but if I break down by falling into some fearful snare, my last state will be worse than my first. So she has a lot of apprehensions to fall a victim to the temptation that times are offering, that Alec is offering. Oh God, I cannot think of it. Let me come at once, or at once come to me. We can notice the urgency in her voice. Would be content, glad to live with you as your servant, if I may not as your wife, so that I could only be near you and get glimpses of you and think of you as mine. The daylight has nothing to show me since you are not here, and I do not like to see the rooks and starlings in the field, because I grieve and grieve to miss you who used to see them with me. I long for only one thing in heaven or earth or under the earth, to meet you, my dear, my own dear. Come to me and save me from what threatens me. Your faithful, heartbroken Tess. So the whole letter, the whole long letter is a request, is a pain of cry, of agony. She has just opened her heart up to share, to show everything that she is going through. She is requesting, she is pleading him either to come back or to call her there. Commenting on this chapter, I would point out a few things. The first is Alec's offer and his selfish ends. Alec repeatedly offers Tess help. He has more selfish purposes behind. It is his desire to have control over her that makes him exert his financial power. If you remember, for the first time when he seduced her, even at that time, it was the offer to help her to provide financial stability, to provide a job, that he used as a trap. When we look at it from the perspective of Tess, the significant difference in this offer to Tess is that it does not aid her, rather her family. And this is the reason of her temptation. If she at all would be tempted by all this, it is not that she is interested in him. We know clearly that she is only interested in one man, and that is Angel. She is not at all interested in Alec. However, the temptation of this financial aid, support or help, when it is extended to the family, this really can be meaningful for her, and she may be tempted with this. This we can apprehend as readers. There are two important themes that I would like to talk about with reference to this chapter. The first theme is the theme of good versus bad. Alec's reintroduction into the novel comes at Tess's lowest moment, but his new pitch still does not work on her. She has not seen Alec for quite a long time, but she has clearly thought about him and what he did to her. She is observant and distrusting of Alec, and she views his conversion as a plot to win her back. To her, he appears more like a devil in disguise who has come to tempt her again. We notice her struggle against the repeated offers and temptations of Alec as the struggle of good against evil. The second theme that is an interconnected theme in this context, that is of responsibility. For the first time when Tess left home, she left it for the responsibility that she felt for her family. However, this leaving home ended up with her disgrace. Now again she knows Alec and his motives very well, but it is in the sense of responsibility towards her family that creates temptation when Alec offers help. Divided between her sense of loyalty to Angel and her sense of responsibility towards her family, we see that she is in a state of conflict. This leads us to chapter 49 of this phase. The letter that Tess has written goes to Angel's parents, who forward it to Angel in Brazil. The Clares blame themselves for Angel's marriage, for if Angel were not kept from attending Cambridge, he would not have to be a farmer and he would not have to marry an agricultural girl in that case. Mrs. Clare reproaches her husband for keeping Angel from attending Cambridge, whereas Reverend Clare feels justified in his decision. However, he too as a father regrets the misery his son has endured. As far as Angel himself is concerned, he has endured so much hardship that he now is ready to abandon his idea of farming in Brazil. The suffering he has endured there has made him sympathetic towards Tess. When a more experienced man tells him he was wrong to leave her, Angel feels a regret over his decision. When that man dies a few days later, his words assume even more power in Angel's mind because they prick his conscience. On the other hand, there is yet more difficulty waiting for Tess. Her sister Liza Lou comes with the sorrowful news that Tess's mother is dying and her father is also very ill and can not do any work. Tess tells Iz and Marion that what has happened and to her family, and the next morning she leaves for her home. Again, we see that under the sense of responsibility that she feels for her family, she decides to go home to help them. Anyhow, this brings us to chapter 50, and in this chapter we see her reaching her birthplace. Upon her arrival, Tess does what she can to make her mother comfortable. In order to support her family, she starts working in the garden and on the family's land. One night as she works, there she looks over and sees Alec working next to her. He again offers to help Tess and her family. She is really in need of help, but she declines that again. Alec leaves very angry. As Tess was on her own way home, her sister brings the news that their father has died, which means that Tess's family will lose their house. John Durbeyfield was the last person who was given that place on lease, and now the owner of the house wants to use it for his own workers. It becomes ironic here that the mother of Tess is very ill, but she recovers, and suddenly the father dies, and with his death the possibility of having a roof for the family also dies. Here is some part of the text that I found significant for you to understand. Nobody looked at his or her companions. The eyes of all were on the soil as its turned surface was revealed by the fires. Hence, as Tess stirred the clouds and sang her foolish little songs, with scarce now a hope that Claire would ever hear them, she did not for a long time notice the person who worked nearest to her. So as she is working again on the land, she noticed scarcely a person who was working nearby. A man in a long smock frock who she found was forking the same plot as herself, and whom she supposed her father had sent there to advance the work. She became more conscious of him when the direction of his digging brought him closer. Sometimes the smoke divided them, then it severed, and the two were visible to each other but divided from all the rest. Surrounded by that smoke, they could see each other. Tess did not speak to her fellow worker, nor did he speak to her. Nor did she think of him further than to recollect that he had not been there when it was broad daylight, and that she did not know him any one of the Marlott labourers, which was no wonder, her absences having been so long frequent of late years. By and by he dug so close to her that the fire beams were reflected as distinctly from the steel prongs of his fork as from her own. अब रात हो गई है, अंधेरा हो गया, वह आग जलाई हुई है वहाँ पर, and all of them are working. And in this context, in the light of the fire, now she can see the man. On going up to the fire to throw a pitch of dead weeds upon it, she found that he did the same on the other side. The fire flared up, and she beheld the face of d'Urberville. Once again, Alec is there. He is following her. He has reached there where she is now. The text continues on this slide. Tess was not expecting Alec to be there. The unexpectedness of his presence, the grotesqueness of his appearance in a gathered smock frock, such as was now worn only by the most old-fashioned of the labourers, had a ghastly comicality that chilled her as to its bearing. D'Urberville emitted a low, long laugh. He is teasing her. If I were inclined to joke, I should say, "How much this seems like paradise," he remarked whimsically, looking at her with an inclined head. "What do you say?" she weakly asked. A jester might say this is just like paradise. You are Eve and I am the old other one, come to tempt you in the disguise of an inferior animal. I used to be quite up in that scene of Milton's when I was theological. Some of it goes. Empress, the way is ready and not long, beyond a row of myrtles. If thou accept my conduct, I can bring thee thither soon. Lead then, said Eve, and so on. My dear Tess, I am only putting this to you as a thing that you might have supposed or said quite untruly because you think so badly of me. What we can notice कि वो उसका मजाक उड़ा रहा है, उसको tease कर रहा है, and Hardy has used the symbols of paradise and Eve and Satan, the serpent who is there to tempt the Eve. Well, it also foreshadows a lot. आदम और हवा की कहानी में जन्नत में हमने देखा कि Amma Hawa Eve was tempted by the serpent. So here what it foreshadows, this analogy then foreshadows something to happen in future, where maybe Tess would be tempted by Alec. However, right now what she says is, I never said you were Saturn or thought it. I don't think of you in that way at all. My thoughts of you are quite cold except when you affront me. What did you come digging here? Entirely because of me? Entirely. To see you, nothing more. The smock frock which I saw hanging for sale as I came along was an afterthought that I might not be noticed, I come to protest against your working like this. But I like doing it. It is for my father. Again, her sense of responsibility towards her family is clear. Your engagement at the other place is ended, he asked. Yes. Where are you going to next? To join your dear husband? She couldn't bear the humiliating reminder. Oh, I don't know, she said bitterly. I have no husband. It is quite true in the sense you mean, but you have a friend, and I have determined that you shall be comfortable in spite of yourself. When you get down to your house, you will see what I have sent there for you. Oh, Alec, I wish you wouldn't give me anything at all. I cannot take it from you. I do not like. It is not right. It is right, he cried lightly. I am not going to see a woman whom I feel so tenderly for as I do for you in trouble without trying to help her. But I am very well off. I am only in trouble not about living at all. She turned and desperately resumed her digging, tears dripping upon the fork handle and upon the clods. She is trying to hide the reality. About the children, your brothers and sisters, he resumed. I have been thinking of them. अब वो फिर उसके दिल के उस कोने को छेड़ रहा है ना, जहाँ where she is already weak. He is talking about her brothers and sisters, the children, the family. And she already loves them so much, she feels herself so very much responsible for their well-being, that when he says all this, she of course feels touched. Tess's heart quivered. He was touching her in a weak place. He had divined her chief anxiety. Since returning home, her soul had gone out to those children with an affection that was passionate. If your mother does not recover, somebody ought to do something for them, since your father will not be able to do much, I suppose. अब उसको मुस्तकबिल के खतरे दिखा रहा है. He can with my assistance, he must. And with mine, he adds. No, sir. How damned foolish this is, burst out D'Urberville. Why, he thinks we are the same family and will be quite satisfied. He don't. I have undeceived him. The more fool you. D'Urberville in anger retreated from her to the hedge, where he pulled off the long smock frock which had disguised him, and rolling it up and pushing it into the couch fire, went away again. So once again he has been denied, he has been rejected, he has been not accepted by Tess. When it comes to important discussion points with reference to this chapter, I would say the death of the father of Tess is an ironic reversal of fortune for the Durbeyfield family, for it is Joan who makes a sudden recovery, the mother, whose health seemed most in danger before this. This also changes the dynamics of the relationship of Tess with Alec. Now she needs help for her family because the place where they live was leased on the name of their father, who was taken as the last person to whom it was leased. Alec's frequent attempts to help Tess become more and more sinister, and his sole desire for domination becomes very, very obvious. This leads us to chapter 51, and what we notice is that after the death of her father now, Tess is left with the sole responsibility of her family. As they have to vacate the place, she appears to move her family to a set of rooms in Kingsburgh. Alec comes once again. He tells Tess the legend of the ghostly D'Urberville coach, the message of which is that the sound of an invisible coach is a bad omen. According to family legend, a D'Urberville abducted a beautiful woman who tried to escape from his coach, and in a struggle he killed her. Tess admits that she is the reason that her family must leave their home, for she is not a proper woman. Again, she is criticizing her, she is blaming her for everything that happens to her family. Alec offers to move her family to his family's garden home. He persuades her to allow him to help her, to allow him to send her brothers and sisters to school, and to have Tess's mother tend the fowls at their farmhouse. In these tough circumstances, Tess is tempted by the offer, but she once more declines his offer. Alec leaves, but Tess admits to herself that Angel has treated her badly. For the first time, we notice that she blames Angel for treating her in a bad way. Once again, she writes him a letter, but this time she blames him for not treating her in a good way. She asserts that she will do all she can to forget him, since she will never be able to forgive him. As her mother, Joan, has seen a man, Alec, at the window where he has come again to meet and to persuade Tess. She inquires about that, and Tess tells her that it was not Angel, and she also says that she will tell her later once they reach and get settled at their new place. This, dear students, is the text of another letter that Tess wrote to her husband, Angel. She passionately seized the first piece of paper that came to hand and scribbled the following lines. Now this is the text of the letter. "Oh, why have you treated me so monstrously, Angel? I do not deserve it. I have thought it all over carefully, and I can never forgive you. You know that I did not intend to wrong you. Why have you so wronged me? You are cruel, cruel indeed. I will try to forget you. It is all injustice I have received at your hands." And the initials T. When it comes to important critical points with reference to this chapter, I would say that this phase mainly focuses on the return of Alec, his interest in Tess, his repeated offers of help, and his desire to control Tess. This chapter is again a continuation of the same, where we would see him trying to tempt her, making various offers to help her family. We notice that Tess once again shoulders the burden of her family's troubles when she finds them in problem. So the theme of responsibility comes in again, the theme of loyalty to the family comes in again. We find that Tess has always taken responsibility when her family has faced hardship, yet always she blames herself. Here Tess actually is the reason for her family's hardship. The recurrence of past sins is also evident in this phase. Despite all her efforts, Tess cannot get rid of the shadows of past. However, one important thing that I noticed in this chapter was, for the first time she blames Angel. For the first time she can see how wrongly she has been treated by Angel, and she says that she would not ever be able to forgive Angel for all this, though she would try to forget him. This leads us to chapter 52. In chapter 52, what we see is that Tess and her family leave Marlott. As they are on their journey, Tess sees Marion and Iz, who have left the hard life at Flintcomb Ash and are moving on to new work at a new farm. When they reach Kingsburgh, they learn that John's letter was late and the rooms have already been rented out to somebody else. They cannot find more lodging, and as they don't have any lodging, they end up sleeping in the churchyard in a plot called D'Urberville Isle. There once again Tess finds Alec on a tomb, and he calls her, he talks to her, he tells her that he can do more for her than all her noble ancestors, asserting, "The little finger of the sham D'Urberville can do more for you than the whole dynasty of the real underneath. Now command me, what shall I do?" This again is a big temptation for her. Tess once again, however, rejects his offer and asks him to leave. Alec leaves in anger, claiming that Tess would learn lessons. Marion and Iz, the women who are the friends of Tess and who used to work with her, they discuss Tess and Angel. Marion thinks that they will never have Angel back, so they should try to help patch up between him and Tess. They write to Angel that he should look to his wife if he loves her as she really loves him. Critically looking at this chapter, we notice that the Derbyfield family, leaving their home and having no lodgings, find themselves in the crypt of the family from which they are descended. This symbolizes the final descent of the D'Urberville, as the last remaining members of a family take residence with the remains of the dead nobility. It becomes quite symbolic and quite ironic, I would say. It is important for us to notice the selfless actions of Iz and Marion, who try to repair the marriage between Angel Clare and Tess. This selfless action reinforces the love that Tess has for Angel, for if she did not love him so much, Iz and Marion would have attempted to tempt Angel for themselves, not to try to convince him to return to Tess. This brings us to the end of this phase, but before closing this phase, I would just like to have an overall discussion on phase 6. Important themes that emerged through this phase are the theme of permanence of sin, the theme of suffering, and the theme of temptation. We find Tess in a constant state of conflict. Her integrity demands that she should stay away from Alec, whom she does not love, but her duty to her family and her sense of responsibility towards her family tempts her to go with him to save her mother and her siblings. Integrity wins out throughout the section, but we get the sense that it is only a matter of time before Tess is forced to submit. As keen readers, we can apprehend maybe soon she would submit to the will of Alec. As a result, the story in this section and the part of the next section is propelled along by a kind of race. Angel needs to forgive Tess and return to her before she surrenders to Alec. The tension in the story has increased a lot. As Alec's courtship of Tess increases in intensity, so does the chain of misfortune happenings in Tess's life. We notice a lot of things happening. We notice her mother getting ill. We notice her coming back out of her sense of responsibility to the family. We notice that her father dies suddenly. We also come to know that the death of the father means a lot more than personal grief and sorrow, because with the loss of the father, they have lost their right to live in that house as well that was leased against his name. We notice her options are narrowing down. We also notice in these tough circumstances, Alec's offers become more tempting, and gradually Tess finds it hard to decline these offers. At the same time, she becomes more desperate in her desire to reconcile with Angel. Come to me, she pleads. Come to me and save me from what threatens me. She apprehends the same what we apprehend for her as readers. She knows if Angel does not come to rescue her, she will fall a prey to Alec's temptations. We as readers have to weigh it as needs versus temptation or suffering versus temptation. We also notice that Angel is in the process of changing as a result of his own bad experiences in Brazil. He begins to change his reaction towards Tess, slowly realizing that his way of thinking has been wrong. However, what we apprehend is that maybe he would be too late to have a complete realization and to come back to Tess as a result of that realization. Before that, maybe Alec would be able to seduce her once again. We also find that the supernatural Gothic atmosphere of the old D'Urberville mansion appears here at the D'Urberville Isle in the churchyard. Here, Tess, a real D'Urberville, and Alec, an impostor, have one of their most solemn moments as Alec asserts that he can do more for Tess than all her lofty dead ancestors. This is a sharp criticism, and this is a viewpoint of Hardy that he has presented here about the ancestors and the dead ancestors and the lineage that he thinks is of no use, the concept of nobility that he has argued against. Tess begins to realize the futility of claiming such an aristocratic legacy, since her ancestors truly cannot help her at all. She begins to realize that Alec may be her only hope. In the yard, Alec's legend of the D'Urberville coach evokes the Gothic or supernatural elements yet again creating an ill omen that foreshadows the deadly conclusion of this story, maybe towards the end. With this, we come to the end of our today's session. In today's session, we have covered phase 6, and in the next session, inshallah ta'ala, we would complete the novel. Before I close today's session, I would just like to share a quick review of today's session. Our today's session was, as I said earlier, based on phase 6. The title of phase 6, The Convert, tells us that the phase mainly deals with Alec, his conversion, his then reverting back to what he already was. So in this phase we covered chapters 45 to 52 and we finished this phase. In doing so, we have covered and explored the text of different chapters, we have explored related themes, we have explored the development of different characters, and we have critically analyzed the selected parts of the text. With this, I come to the end of today's session. Thank you very much.